Good afternoon. This is the Harbor Management Commission Plan Update 4 o'clock meeting on April 29th, 2021. Due to COVID, we are not able to take public comment. However, comments are welcome and can be sent to the Harbor Management Commission, HMC, at fairfieldct.org with plan update for 29-21 committee meeting in the subject line. Comments so received will be included in the minutes as long as they are accompanied by the sender's name and address. We will not publish the sender's email address. So with that, we have Cheryl here, Jack, Jeff, Doug. Doug was not sure that he was going to be able to make it on time. Mark Foster?
Present. Oh, good.
Oh, great, Mark. Sam Cargill? Mary Von Conta? Okay, let's begin and hope that others will join us. I sent to you earlier just part of Chapter 6 of the current harbor plan. It's the first section that deals with water use and navigation. There are probably 30 or so more pages of this Chapter 6 that deal with environmental issues, and it was Jeff's thinking that it would be easier for us to focus on these environmental parts of these water use parts of the plan separately from the environmental parts of that chapter. So my suggestion is that we plan at our next meeting to take a look at the modifications that we might want to make to the second half of this chapter. Also, unlike the work that we did at our last meeting, this section doesn't really lend itself to editing and wordsmithing. So I think it would be more productive for us to brainstorm some ideas related to each of the, I think there are 15 recommendations that are part of this section of the plan. If we brainstorm, then Jeff can have some direction for moving ahead with his modifications, and ultimately we will have the opportunity then to go back and to pay more attention to some of the details and perhaps some of the language if we decide to do that going forward. So Jeff, why don't you tell us kind of what your suggestions are for where you've said, for example, in number 1, recommendations should be modified to maintain the possibility of future modifications as may become necessary. So when you say that, did you have anything specific in mind? Do you want suggested possibilities for modifications from us? What kind of brainstorming would be useful here?
Well, I hope I don't start talking too much here, but this chapter was included specific recommendations rather than, of course, the more general policies and the goals. And some of these recommendations were developed specifically to deal with the issues that were the reason that the plan was established in the first place in the commission, which was were the violations at the Pequot Yacht Club. So some of these recommendations have been achieved, and we can talk about that as we go through them. But in large part, these recommendations were to address the specific problems at the time that led to the formation of the Harbor Management Commission, and they principally had to do with the management of the harbor under the open to all on equal terms policy. So the first recommendation, and again a little bit of background, simply stating that there should continue to be a federal navigation project. In part, that was a result of responding to people who said if you defederalize the whole navigation project, then you won't have to worry about all of these different issues with the yacht club, and we can do whatever we want in the harbor. And that wasn't considered an appropriate recommendation to make. But I think we want to maintain that federal navigation project and again, the Corps of Engineers' responsibilities. So that's pretty much that would stay. But the recommendation as it exists now talks about specific modifications that are described later on in the recommendations, and we don't need to do those anymore. But there may be need for some further modifications in the future that we don't anticipate now, but that there may be some need for. But so we want to leave open that possibility. And interestingly,
Jeff, So one of the things is the use of language here. So when this was done 25 years ago, the use of maintain was the meaning of maintain to be kept, right? To be retained was the idea, right? As opposed to maintenance. But we're not talking about maintenance. We're talking about kept. That we want to keep having a federal navigation project is what you mean by this.
In this recommendation, yes, that's a very good point. But later on,
we have some critical issues about the maintenance of the federal navigation project.
Yes.
And as we rewrite this or whatever we do here, we should be crystal clear. There are two important issues here. One is about that we want to keep it, and the second, and to your point, potentially leave open the opportunity of modifying it. But there's also the critical issue around.
That's a very good point, because in number one, the maintain is as you've just described, Jack. To keep it.
So maybe retained is a better word, we can play with the wording, but I now understand.
Now, since this recommendation was made, we not only made the modifications to the navigation project as recommended in the plan, but there was a further modification, and I forget the year that also has to be reflected in here, which changed the designation of the navigation project from channel to anchorage, from the area about where the south docks at the town boatyard are up until where the harbor widens. So we did that so that we wouldn't have to worry about mooring boats that might encroach into the channel, which is prohibited. But they could encroach a little bit into the anchorage as long as we maintain the fairway. But no, that's I got off the track. But yes, this is for retaining, or we can think of a good word for that. And interestingly, when we did this, and it was Congressman Shays at the time and Senator Lieberman whose staff were working with the Harbor Commission to figure out how to do this. And of course, nobody will remember this now, but they came up with they being Shays and Lieberman of a process that would be followed for making modifications to federal navigation projects. And they established it with respect to this project, and it was intended to apply to any other navigation project in Connecticut. But of course, nobody remembers that. And the process was to be that it would be a modification that was consistent with the local harbor management plan, and it would be the request would be submitted by the Harbor Management Commission, which would explain the need for it and how it was intended to have a public benefit. And then the first selectman, was the first select man at the time, would write a letter of support for it, and the DEP would also have to agree, and then the Corps of Engineers would draft the federal language to be adopted by Congress. So there was a process to be followed, and the idea was that any modifications would be shown to be in the public interest, not to benefit just one harbor user or harbor user group. So anyway, that's sorry for talking, but that's a
Jeff,
very good point.
Jeff, could I interrupt for 1 second, please?
Yeah.
I'm looking at the original first, the first edition of the plan. Can you give me page numbers for where we are?
Mary, is that you or?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I didn't know. All right. Well, if you're looking at the pages of the paper the copy, is that what you're looking at?
I'm looking at the original harbor management plan that I received when I became a member of the commission. It was
look on page
done.
6-1.
6-1, and that's chapter what?
6-1.
Chapter 6. Okay, all right. Thanks. I'm sorry. I'm asleep on the job as usual.
Okay,
right,
so Jeff, so I guess commissioners, except for is there any suggestions for or any ideas that we think that should be included in this one paragraph? Southport Harbor Federal Navigation Project should be maintained.
I like Jack's idea about coming up with a more descriptive word for maintain, for what we're actually referring to here. And then maybe a little bit about adding, if we are to proceed with modifications in the future, they would be in accordance with a procedure that would be intended to advance the public interest or something like that, rather than the interest of. But I think that we keep the basis of the recommendation. We just maybe clarify it based on what we know now, and but that was the purpose of it, and because there were people who we argued that if we could, I say we, the Harbor Commission, if it could get the plan approved and adopted, then the Corps of Engineers would proceed with dredging the project. And there were people who doubted that, and they said we don't need that, we can do it ourselves. But it turned out just as we had anticipated. The plan was approved, and then the Corps went through with the dredging project. The issue was that the DEP wouldn't allow the maintenance or the removal of the sandbar. But
interesting.
The original dredging that they didn't allow. Oh, they. When was that original dredging? After the plan was approved.
2004 and 2005, I believe, Mary.
Okay. All right. And they left the sandbar was not anywhere near as big as it is now, right?
Well, it was still substantial.
Yeah.
And then number two is the area opposite Perry Green, the wide area across, and the idea was that that actually had been formally authorized as a channel, not as an anchorage, and the history of that, of course, is interesting. There were when the channels were originally dredged in the 1800s, and that there were two channels that split. One went to the little bit to the north, and the other went to sort of the south of Perry Green, and then along the shore on the west. And there was an area in between that was dredged out to provide fill for the country club. And so when that was dug out, it widened that navigation area between Perry Green and the dike, the wall on the east side, and then that was always had been designated as a channel. So with boats are not to be moored in a federal navigation channel. So that was another problem to correct at the time. So part of the solution was, as we said in number 2, was to redesignate that area from channel to anchorage, and therefore you could continue to have boats moored in that area. So that recommendation was was acted on and achieved, so we could keep the boats there. But maybe we want to say something in here now about how that area will be managed, including the use of that area for deeper draft boats and. But that's my thought. We maybe instead of saying that this should be become an anchorage, we say something about how we should manage that anchorage.
That's a good idea.
Jeff, I think that's a good idea. One thought I did have reading through the section was that there's a whole section on sort of history of how it's being managed further down into this section, and seems like one of the changes that's occurred since the plan was instituted was that now all mooring tackle in the inner harbor is, other than in the North Anchorage, is, and certainly this area that we're talking about, is owned and controlled by the town, and it might be worth putting that new updated information into this section to make it clear that there's an expectation that will be the case going forward.
Yes, that's a good point.
The fact
I think a lot of this
that
history is good to retain. We should keep some of this history. I think it's very useful to have here.
It's very useful, yeah. Didn't we, in our proposed new rules, didn't we change anchorage to include anchorage and mooring, or something about mooring, so it's clear that we're not intending the word anchorage to mean a place where people come in and drop a hook? And I wonder if that is something that we want to clarify.
Right,
for public safety, it's exclusively moorings, right?
Well, we should clarify that, because but the federal the proper term is a federal anchorage, but the management of this, though, would be for the mooring of vessels according to the Commission's rules and procedures, and not we can clarify that, but that's another good point.
Okay.
But we have to keep the term anchorage, because it is a federal anchorage basin.
Okay.
Any other thoughts about number 2? Okay.
Just I have a question. I assume there is some place later on where we fill in that the moorings throughout the harbor are owned by the town of Fairfield, with the possible exception of the North Anchorage, I guess.
Yeah.
That might be clarified regardless of who was sitting on
it. We mentioned that, Mary. We can
make
Mary,
clear
that in this section too. Yeah.
Yeah. And yes, that's important to know. And let's see, I'm trying to think of other things that have come up.
Okay,
Dave,
moving along, number 3. This is really refers to the MOA. I'm not sure.
This is interesting too, because this was part of the problem that we had to deal with, because the boundary of what at the time was the channel, and then we would want to have that changed to an anchorage, was along the edge of the yacht club's property, and the yacht club had built docks that extended out into what was then the channel, and then it would later become the anchorage. So as part of the redesign, if that's the right word, or modification of the overall federal project, we worked to get Congress to do it, move that western boundary of what was then the federal channel away from the shoreline, which then would allow the yacht club structures to be not encroaching into that part of the navigation project anymore. But we also wanted to do that. And one of the arguments for doing that was that would allow the yacht club to put this floating dock on this additional floating dock. Now, I'm
which one?
The 420
the service dock, Mary.
Oh, that's
that we called it.
Yeah.
And then it was, and I don't know that they've ever did that proposed service dock extension, but the idea was that they would remove the channel at the time boundary away, allow the yacht club to do what they wanted to do there, but then they would have to provide services to the public for the use of at that facility, and that's what got into the that's also addressed in the MOA.
Well, the service dock is the gas dock, then, right?
Yes.
Okay, so they were allowed to move it into had been the channel, right?
Well, we look at this, and I'm sorry I don't know the answer. Certainly move the line away from the shore so that the yacht club's docks were no longer encroaching into it. And the idea was to allow them to put a seasonal extension. But whether they've done that or not, I don't know. But in any case, they had to move that line over.
The yacht club put the whole marina into the channel. And when was that? That was what triggered this harbor management plan, right?
That's part of it, Mary. But this is just talking about the service dock now. The recommendation here deals with the service dock.
Well, as far as I know, the service dock has been where it is and has not been changed in a very, very long time. They certainly don't pull it into the land in the wintertime.
So maybe that seasonal extension is no longer something that we need to include, but we do need to include in this the public use of the proper public or appropriate public use of the service dock.
Yes, and that's where visiting boats land. That's to make arrangements, etc., and get to whatever it is they need. Yeah. And
Jeff, if we're modifying the point of this particular, maybe it doesn't belong here, but it seems like we should put a recommendation somewhere, maybe here, that not just the docks not encroaching into the federal anchorage, but now that we have floating docks that are in the inner harbor but not encroaching into the federal anchorage, it seems like we should specifically point those out and recognize that those don't encroach, but that recognize that there are 4 of these floats for the ideals. The previously approved 420 dock and mentioned the whaler dock. All of those, my understanding is, don't encroach, but it seems like this would be a good place, or perhaps somewhere else in the section, to specifically note that those exist, but they don't encroach in the federal anchorage.
Well, the service dock is pulled over to the service dock is over at the country club side of the harbor in the summer. It has sailboats on it. In the wintertime, it comes in and is attached to another dock, which is on the other side of the harbor, right next to the yacht club property, and it is attached to a dock that's I guess I'm trying to think now, and my memory is not that good, but for sure it has. No, there's always a service dock there for sailboats and getting things up and down and all that sort of stuff. It's not where the launch comes in or anything like that. And then there's the service dock that services with fuel and ice and blah blah, right? But in the summertime, they have the dock that is currently there, attached to, as you walk into, if you stand and look at the wall from standing on the wall, looking across at the Country Club of Fairfield, you have a dock with a ramp on it, which goes down and has the gasoline dock. It's attached to the gasoline dock, and boats can tie up behind the gasoline. Small boats are tied up there, and then to the left of that, there is another dock which has a ramp going down to it, and that ramp in the wintertime takes you down to the dock that is on the Country Club side. It's moved over to the Country Club side of the harbor for the summer season, specifically for storing sailboats on the dock. And in the wintertime, it comes...
Right, that's the 420 dock, right, Mary?
That's the 420 dock, but the 420 dock is brought back to the yacht club side, and that's where they put the dinghies, the frostbite boats. They don't leave it in the harbor next to the country club yet.
Right, but we don't have to account for. We don't have to. If we, as Jack said, if we mention that there are floating docks and that they need to stay out of the navigation channel, then that that should take care of, right, all of
but
the...
they can't go la-di-da over to the other side of the harbor without a special arrangement, which, sad to say, the Yacht Club I Gather found out they hadn't made that special arrangement and had to do that. Is that correct?
Right.
They did make a special arrangement for the one that they put the sailboats on, for the junior.
But this recommendation is specific to the service dock and to a possible seasonal placement of an additional floating dock. And so if the Yacht Club has done that, then I can check on that. But if they haven't, we should still make the reference to the service dock and to the public use of that, which we can do here.
Right.
Now,
the purpose of number 3 would change to be just that. I have a general question, just Jeff. So as we go through this, some of these things could either be eliminated altogether as recommendations, or they could be modified to be focusing on something different than they were 25 years ago. Is that correct?
And that's what I was thinking, that most of them would be the latter.
They cannot be modified. You have to know. You have to know up front where the line is in front of these docks that goes from...
Right, Mary, yes, that's right. We're talking about...
And you have to know exactly where that line is, and you cannot have anything permanently
Mary, the point I was making
that
is that in the document we can change the words for number 3 to be focused on the topics that we want to focus on. It doesn't have to specifically address what was important 25 years ago. We can change it to focus on something different.
Yeah.
Well, I can assure you that if the Coast Guard flew over that and found a big boat in one of those slips, and its stern was half of its stern was sticking out into the into the harbor, there is a specific line that you cannot have boats over.
Mary, just let me interrupt
and nobody's
for a second.
arguing that, Mary.
Yeah, we're not talking about modifying the line, Mary. We're talking about modifying the language of the recommendation. Do you know what I mean? We're not talking about modifying anything physically. It's what we were trying to get at with the recommendation years ago. In a number of these instances, we've achieved that. So now we're modifying the recommendation to be consistent with the current conditions. We're not talking about modifying any of the lines or the construction of anything to encroach. Don't worry about that.
I'm not worrying about. Well, I have worried about that over the years because there's a lot of fuss about it. But
worry about it with somebody.
The service dock is where the is the gas dock, and that is not moved in winter. And I think it stays permanently. You just can't leave a boat on it during the summer or the winter.
Right.
You can come in and get fuel and do all that, but you should not have a boat docked on the service dock.
Right.
Any other suggestions for number 3? Yeah. Any other suggestions about modifications, additions we want to make in number 3?
That's helpful. I can. Yeah.
Okay. Should we move on then to number 4, which is the Federal Navigation Project should be redesigned to provide opportunity for establishment of a designated mooring area for Pequot Yacht Club?
And now this has been accomplished too, just like the one of the preceding recommendations for changing the channel to Anchorage. So this has been accomplished. This is the North Anchorage, but just like we were saying things in the about the federal Anchorage, we can talk about how the Yacht Club's North Anchorage should be managed. But we also continue to include the requirement that as long as they make use of this anchorage, that they will provide the boating services to the public as specified in the memorandum of agreement.
And how about it? It is a non-federal body of water. Okay, it's been whatever.
Right, it says that, Mary. Yeah, it says defederalized. Yeah.
Defederalized. Okay, so it's a defederalized body of water with a permit involved. Okay?
Right.
And the Yacht Club so far has kept the permit because it does what it said it would do.
Right.
Yes.
So, Jeff, on this one, is this a place where we might update it with what I assume will be our approval in our mooring rules, that the permit will be a permit issued to Pequot for all 51 of those?
Yes.
mooring. It seems like this is another sort of...
As long as they maintain an agreement that they have with, as part of that whole deal. They have to continue to provide the services.
Right, but to update this, we can make reference to how we keep saying how the commission manages this area, and that can reflect the permit issued to the yacht club, and then some of these other services that we talk about, the boating services where those are listed.
Right.
You know, some of those would continue. I think we can update them a bit, but and one thing that's not relevant anymore is interestingly, we had talked in this recommendation that the club's permit would not from deep, forget which number this is. It would not be for an indefinite period of time, but would be subject to renewal. And the thinking was to make sure that the yacht club does comply with what these conditions are. But then
and
after
the yacht club will pay for any dredging of that property too.
That's a different thing, Mary. But as the time went by, and the yacht club was in effect complying with those agreements, the permits were changed to make them in perpetuity. Although there is reference to the services that the yacht club has to provide, but we want to keep in the plan that even though those permits don't require renewal anymore, they're still based on the yacht club providing these services. And if they cease to provide the services, the permits would be no longer valid.
And
Jeff, one thing I know we did in updating the mooring rules that is a piece of their commitment is that they're to provide the transient mooring locations, and it was sort of unclear in the previous language, and maybe if we're making reference to those commitments to provide services in this document, what we ended up doing is making it clear that the yacht club pays the town for the mooring tackle for those transient moorings, rather than the club is not literally owning the tackle for those transient moorings. It's really the town's tackle paid for by the yacht club.
They don't pay a fee.
And I think I saw in another section where it refers to those transient moorings. It says that the yacht club, if I recall correctly, the yacht club will provide the mooring tackle and the moorings. I think
that was previously the way it was written, and I think we updated that when we updated the rules. So again, Jeff, if we're going to get into those levels of detail
are
here,
they
we
still
want to make
stuck
sure
on there have to be 3 empty moorings at all times for transient vessels, or are you allowed to, as the yacht club or whoever's running the mooring situation at that time, are they? In this case, the yacht club can put that anywhere in the area as long as nobody's sitting on the mooring. In other words, the yacht club knows who's coming and going on their moorings, and sometimes they put boats into the yacht club project, and that's perfectly all right because otherwise they'd be having a big mess in the rest of the harbor. And this happens during regattas and things like that. Is there a problem with that? It is done for the best safety of the boats and everybody else. And is that in there? Because that's necessary to know. Wasn't that an issue that needed to be straightened out?
I think we have, Mary.
Well, I think, Mary, if we get if we up with our rules get modified, that should be taken care of. But the rules do say three transient moorings, but that will be.
But you do not have to specify
allow the yacht club more discretion.
Yeah, but you do not have to designate 3 moorings that must be left open because they are transient moorings. In other words, 3. They will host a minimum. There are 3 that have. Yes, that's what the rules say. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so we want to be very careful of that because they in order to maintain, bottom line, in order to maintain that part of the harbor and have it as safe as possible for everybody, it is better to assign a mooring. If you have a 25-foot boat who wants a mooring, you don't want them parked on a mooring that's set up for a 50-foot boat. Okay?
But we've got that, Mary, I think, addressed in the rules and procedures. So that, but the discussion now is that 25 years ago, the recommendation was to create this new mooring area for the yacht club, and in exchange for doing that, the yacht club would provide certain services. Now that's been established, but we still want to continue a recommendation in this regard, having to do with the services that the yacht club provides, and how the moorings will be managed according to the rules and procedures. So I think to follow up on what Jack said, we just refocus the recommendation, but the topic is sort of the same. It's the use of that North Anchorage, and what we want to say about that here in this recommendation. So we don't delete this whole thing. We update it and reflect it.
The yacht club is required by the MOA,
right,
by the agreement.
Right, we're not arguing that, Mary.
Yeah, I know, but the members of the yacht club and visitors all should realize that they can be put on any mooring in the harbor that is vacant,
right,
if necessary.
Any other suggestions for number 4 before we move on?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, number 5.
Uh-huh. And
Town of Fairfield should manage use of the Federal Navigation Project.
Yes,
and I think
that should be clear to everybody.
Well, no, but the idea, Mary, was that we do the harbor management plan. We do the plan. It becomes accepted. The Harbor Management Commission. It's not that the state and the federal government are going to be always telling the commission what to do. The responsibility for managing it would day to day would rest with the Harbor Management Commission. So in a way, this was one of the benefits of doing this is that there would be a recognition of that the Harbor Commission is responsible for managing it, not having the Corps of Engineers be down here or the state telling us what to do. So I think one thing that could be mentioned here in this section is the commitment to the open to all on equal terms policy, which isn't referenced here now. And we didn't. I think that policy existed then, but I don't know if it was called the same thing. But I think my suggestion would be to keep the basis of this, but also update it with reference to that policy.
Jeff, what do you think about potentially including in this some reference to the traditional view that the Harbor Management Commission's decisions carry unless the state can show cause for why their position should be different than ours? This is, I recognize, something that's contentious, but it seems like we should assume that the towns end up with home rule in the end, and we should probably restate the importance of that expectation.
Yes, but Jack, that will go later in the section on how we implement the plan. The responsibilities of the commission for implementing the plan. Okay. It wouldn't, since this is talking about the federal project. We're not talking about the state. Although I did mention the state a little bit, but what you said is exactly. We have later on. We're talking about how to the responsibilities for implementing the plan, and that's where we make clear our assertion that the Harbor Commission's of the nature of the Harbor Commission's recommendations.
Okay.
Any other thoughts about
the town of Fairfield? The statement says the town of Fairfield should manage use of the Federal Navigation Project. How about the Fairfield Harbor Management Commission?
Well, later in there, Mary, we say that
as the arm that manages it.
It says that in the 6th line.
We say that, Mary.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
that's
okay.
6th line.
What? There. Yep.
What's 6th line?
There.
Okay,
number 6. Limits should be placed on the number and size of boats to be moored in the harbor. Do we want to continue with that number?
Yeah, that's a good one. But you know what? Why we did this in part was people were concerned that with the harbor management plan, the harbor would be somehow overrun with people wanting to put boats in the harbor. There was I say people were concerned about that, but there were a number of opponents to the plan. So we were trying to make the argument here that no, there's a fixed number of moorings, and it's going to be based on consideration of the parking spaces. So we weren't going to come up with something that was going to overwhelm the capacity of the harbor. It almost sounds like it goes without saying, but we in terms of whether we want to keep these or not, the number of mooring spaces that could be accessed through the town boatyard. But here's where we also have the one dock and/or mooring for the riparian property owners, and of course that was never meant to be, left to the preference of the waterfront property owner. It was meant to be something that would be reviewed on a case by case.
I think that should be changed. Period.
I don't know if it should be changed or we should be clearer, like we have been in some recent communications about what's meant by that, which is it depends on the situation. For somebody whose boat is got a 6-foot draft and their dock has got 3 feet of water, then they clearly need a mooring too.
Well, they clearly don't need a and/or. Okay, you don't do an and/or because if you did that, you'd have every property owner on the place trying to build a dock and getting a mooring. Okay,
but we can clarify it, Mary.
More people.
Yeah.
But we've clarified that in the pending rules and procedures what we mean by and/or, and it doesn't mean in every instance, and we clarified that, and I think that's
so you
still
gave a rationale for yes or no.
Well, I think the way to start off is to keep that, but just explain what we mean by it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and there are all kinds of issues. I mean, who else are you interfering with if you put a 50-foot boat on? I mean, the biggest one I remember is the one that the one that used to be the first yacht club, the one down where the river comes into the harbor. Tell me the name of it, please. I can't remember. The guy who bought the house, the big house across the street from the yacht club, and put these statues on the front lawn. Also,
that was Mr. Hall, Mary.
Yes, Mr. Hall. I bought it from Ann Estelle, right? And Ann Estelle moved.
So
and,
we have,
or whatever. But anyhow, there was an
we have 66 moorings.
I sort of think we should.
moorings and then 170 to 180, and 25 moorings at Perry Green.
I think the question is, do we want to keep those numbers, or do we want to somehow be different?
I guess one of the things that I just feel like that the way to think about this is that the capacity for boats in the harbor is fixed. I think you've said that elsewhere, and that our recommendation would be that we not try to squeeze more boats into this narrow harbor going forward. Yeah. And our rules now speak to places where conditions do not warrant placement of moorings within the harbor and actually in the outer harbor as well due to conditions. And maybe we reference and reinforce that from the rules as well in this language. But I think all we need to say is that we don't foresee more moorings because every space has been taken.
Well, I think by nature too. All that whole area where that sandbar is used to have moorings in it for boats, and it still did when this plan was issued. It was issued, right? There were more moorings available out there. The accretion of sand has made it impossible to put moorings in places where they were 20 or 30 years ago. Okay.
Oh.
And
so, Jeff, in like paragraph 3 or 4, paragraph 4 here, you say the precise number of moorings will be dependent on the feasibility of dredging, pending environmental review, and so I think that that more of that language
but
would
what Jack said is very good. That we also need to include the policy now that the area upstream of the Pequot Yacht Club is not suitable for mooring locations because of the shallow depths, and the same with the outer harbor. So we can add that into this, and then maybe be not quite as specific about the precise number of boats, but just talk about the limiting conditions and
the last I heard, there were about 135 moorings available in the harbor. And when we first started out, there was room for 150.
But for example, we say approximately 66 moorings may be available to persons who will access their boat using parking space at the town boatyard.
Yeah,
That just seems like
it's a huge number, and I'm sure it's wrong.
Well, we don't, but it just seems
and
like it's
25 moorings
overly
available at Perry Green.
Yeah.
That seems like a lot.
There are not 25 moorings available at Perry Green, I don't think. No. I've been down there sniffing around. They have, with new management, as we have improved the fellow who is the manager of South Benson also manages part of the deal of the boats in front of Perry Green. They take care of the land end of it, and we take care of the yacht club, and it takes care of the mooring buoy end of it. And that changes. And you can't dredge in there. There are many places in there that are loaded with toxic chemicals that you can't dredge for, and rocks. So there's no place to change that. And it goes, on and on.
So the 25,
so
we won't.
Overcrowded.
So that's not.
There's no doubt of that.
Yeah. I mean, we mentioned the parking. I think that's reasonable to continue to mention that as one of the conditions that limit the number of boats, in addition to the conditions in the harbor. I don't know that we need quite the same level of detail in the parking part of it either.
Well, if you're an incomer coming in and trying to get a mooring, and you do get one somewhere, and it all gets this and that, and the other thing has to be done. You do get a space at the dock, the town dock. Then there are Pequot Yacht Club members who live out there and want a space for their motorboat at the town dock, as well as to go to the yacht club to use the launch. Now I felt a little unhappy about that when I realized that was going on. I am very concerned about how difficult it is for a non-member to get into that harbor relative to.
Mary, I think the question now, though, is this recommendation, and how precise we want to be with these numbers, which are not proven not to be quite correct, because if you had 66 from the town boatyard and 25 at Perry Green and 85 at the yacht club, you have 176 boats. So I think we have to give some thought to how we present the total number of boats. But the other things that we talk.
My feeling is that this was written 25 years ago at a time when there was a lot of sensitivity about the amount of traffic and boat traffic, et cetera, at that time. I just feel like those concerns are no longer active concerns, really, and for us to say that the harbor, we don't anticipate having more traffic than we have today, because every mooring space has already been assigned in the areas where we can. I'm not sure we have to say more than that, because we're just, by saying more, we're just inviting concerns that aren't today.
But that's interesting. That's one of the critiques of using this theory of carrying capacity. You identify a particular capacity for a waterway, but you're inviting that capacity to be used up rather than to deal with it in a more indirect way. But I think this is a good discussion, and I think we recognize that those numbers should not be presented as precisely, or maybe not presented at all, and that we can adjust this.
Moorings cannot be placed in certain areas. And it changes with all kinds of things.
Yeah.
Let's move on. It's getting late. Let's move on to number 7. Appropriate mooring and anchorage space should be provided for commercial fishing vessels.
Well, that's a problem.
And it says, yeah.
It is a problem.
Well, whether it's still, and that was put in there to achieve the remove the objection from the Shellfish Commission.
I'm not sure I understand why it's a problem.
From time to time,
our rules address this today in our updated rules, so I just don't know why we would need to update it other than to incorporate the additional things we put in the rules.
Oh, yeah.
Well, does the Shellfish Commission, did they have in mind, was the fishermen they were concerned about the same fishermen that are in our rules?
They had a fisherman who was trying to want to get into South Benson.
But if you look at the bottom, Mary, just for a second, we referenced mooring locations may be used by town and private shellfish seed boats, boats transplanting harvested shellfish, boats planting oyster culch, and other boats engaged in shellfish harvesting or management activities in Southport Harbor. So this is in large part, to include the language that the Shellfish Commission wanted, and it's turned out that there's never really been harvesting of shellfish or management of shellfish resources in the harbor. In fact, the only time I can remember that happening.
You have to manage your shellfish, that land between the tide mill and the back of the commercial mooring space, Yakima mooring space.
So the question is, do we want to maintain? Do we want to keep this?
Keep what?
I think we should, because we have provision for this exact thing in our rules.
Yeah.
The second paragraph is exactly what we have covered in our rules.
You can't dig that space up. It's a shellfish bed, whether we like it or not. That's what it is.
Right.
And it's untouchable.
Right.
So that we don't have any choice there. There is a natural channel, interestingly enough, as you head back in that end of the harbor, over to the left, closer to the land, that small boats can get in. And there is one channel that was approved before the harbor management plan that can be dug by the owners of the house that is at the end of it. And those are there in that area. Other than that, you can't touch it.
Well, but we're not talking about that now, Mary. We're talking about mooring space, and
I thought you were talking about maybe trying to dig that up.
No, we're just talking now about this particular recommendation that deals with mooring space, and the rules and procedures allow for it, for the assignment of vessels for commercial. So I think we can update this to reflect the current rule and procedure that we talked about.
Right.
Okay.
Moving on, number 8. The location of all moorings should be carefully planned and controlled by the Harbor Management Commission and the Harbor Master. I think that's again in our rules. Update according to our new rules.
And this is what, when we put this in at the 25. I keep saying we. When the Commission put this in 25 years ago, it was in response to the issues that were raised that the harbor wasn't managed properly. So that now we're saying that the Commission will take charge. The Harbor Master will take charge and will manage the mooring locations properly. So I think we can just clarify that this is done and make the proper reference to doing this with respect to the rules and procedures, adopted by the Harbor Management Commission pursuant to the. We might also even here reference the use of the online system, but bringing this up to date just to reflect what's done.
Right. There's a diagram of the moorings now.
Yeah.
There's sight lines and placement of moorings managed by the yacht club on behalf of the town. There's all kinds of controls in place now.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
But they shift the boats.
Number 9, all moorings currently located in the harbor in conformance with existing mooring allocation procedures will be recorded on a single list of mooring locations.
Again, the reference to the online mooring system, I guess.
Yeah.
Now,
Okay.
just a moment here.
How does the online system recognize each mooring in the harbor? How do you identify it?
Numerically.
A number, yep. a letter.
Number.
Yep.
Well, how do you do it?
The same system that had been in place by Jeff Engborg is being utilized electronically.
Okay, and are the moorings marked accordingly?
On the system they're marked. I'm not aware that there are any markings on the moorings themselves.
No, I'm not either.
Yeah, but the system has everyone who assigns people to moorings knows which mooring is which, and they're designated in the system and a diagram on the system as well.
But one thing that's odd about this that we have to just think about is that this calls for there were 3 lists at the time. There was the Yacht Club list, the Harbor Master list, and the we call it the Park Commission. That's what it was called then for Perry Green. That Perry Green, we have to make a distinction that the Perry Green list is separate, right?
Right.
We're not we never merged that into the one overall list.
It is the guy who manages the
Justin.
South Benson manages that, and then they are not willing to. The last I heard, and I heard about 3 years ago about this, and had some rather salty discussions with the director of the Parks and Rec. They handle that, and when I went and talked to the South Benson person and chatted on the waterfront and figured out maybe a system to do that, reported it back to the Parks and Rec director, they were furious. And so that was the end of that. They don't want to talk about it.
Well,
that's fine.
But we really do have 3 separate lists. We will be back to 3 separate lists.
How is that?
Right? Because we'll have the the list that the boats. Right? Because, and then if the new rules go into effect and the Yacht Club is managing the moorings in the North Anchorage, and kind of putting people where they can, that list is going to be changing. And then there's the Perry Green list.
But you're exactly right.
You don't have to be a member of the Yacht Club to be on the Perry Green thing, or the other way around.
Right.
So, no, but the point Kim's making is very good, because there will remain 3 separate lists. So we have to explain why that's good. Yeah. We have to explain how those lists are maintained and why that's okay.
Is there a yacht yard?
I mean, the Harbor Master will have. We can certainly make the point that the Harbor Master will have access to all 3 lists.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's because
I don't know that there's even a waiting list currently for Perry Green's Parks and Rec managed moorings, because last year they didn't even use all of those moorings. They didn't assign them all. So they certainly don't have a waiting list. That wouldn't make any sense. But how about Yacht Yard? Is there an assignment or waiting list for people to be able to keep their boats at Yacht Yard?
Sure.
So is there a 4th list?
The Department of Public Works, they keep the list, right, Jeff? Or do they keep it at South Carolina?
It's not something that we manage. I'm just not aware, Jeff. I don't know.
But we're just talking about mooring spaces here, not the dinghy spaces.
Okay, so it wouldn't matter what's going on with Yacht Yard with respect to a list.
And one of the reasons, the background of this is that well, you're laughing, Mary, because I'm talking about all this stuff. But
there are reasons.
But one of the reasons for this is that the Yacht Club members had boats in that wide area opposite Perry Green, and the concern was that the Yacht Club was controlling the boats in that, it was a channel and it changed to anchorage, and they couldn't do that, couldn't control it. Now there were some people at the state who were arguing that we should start all over again, and all of those people should be. They would have to be removed, and you'd start a new list. So the purpose of this was that that there were previous mooring allocation procedures. We'd grandfather all the boats that were in there now but we'd make it clear with one list that the yacht club wouldn't be controlling them. It would be the town. So we can. This is a good discussion. We can monitor it because there still are three lists.
Well, not exactly, Jeff. So really, in online mooring, there's going to be a record for all of the North Anchorage mooring locations. The difference under the new rules is that it's going to show that Pequot Yacht Club is the holder of all 51 of those permits and the 51 mooring locations that were previously permitted separately. But because we're keeping track of the maintenance of all moorings in the harbor, the system's still going to maintain records for every mooring in the harbor, including the ones in the North Anchorage. So there's going to be a separate list of who Pequot is assigning to their 51 moorings, which will be kept by Pequot. But the online mooring system will have records for all the moorings in the harbor.
Including the Perry Green ones?
Including the Perry Green moorings. It does now and will continue to do that. So as you write this, you can be aware that the online mooring system does, in fact, have record keeping for all the mooring locations in the inner harbor. But Kim's right also. There is a separate list of who got assigned this on any given day under the new rules in the Pequot 51 moorings.
Yeah. Well, we can. But this discussion is necessary to figure out how to do this, write this. So that's good.
But at the end of the day, what we I guess what we really care about is that we've got in one place all the lists are combined in one place in the online mooring system.
Mm-hmm. That's
and
right. With respect to who controls the mooring,
that's really
we do have that. Yeah. What we don't have is boat and owner information for every mooring in the harbor in that system any longer.
Mm-hmm. Right. And we don't have that what was called the Sullivan line back then. That was
we don't have that at all now.
Essentially, we do have
the
Sullivan line, but don't mind me. But not officially anymore. Now, Joe Blow, member of Pequot Yacht Club, starts in the moorings field, the Pequot Yacht Club mooring field, assigned by the Pequot Yacht Club to that space that they control. And they have a 25-foot sailboat with a draft of 3 feet. Okay. 2 years later, the owner of that boat inherits $6 million, and he buys a bigger boat. He's still entitled to a mooring in South Port Harbor. Okay? It's not the same mooring anymore, and yes, they have to wander around and find a place for him. If they can possibly do it in their mooring space, they will. But they still have that responsibility. So the type of boat that's being put in there or any other place in the harbor changes sometimes because the owner of the user of the mooring still has the permit, and he doesn't have to give it up because he changed a boat. Okay? And I'm pretty sure I'm dead right on that one.
But that's really up to Pequot Yacht Club with respect to the moorings in the North Anchorage, and under our rules, there's no guarantee that if somebody gets a vessel that doesn't fit on their former mooring assignment, that they will be getting a new mooring. That's the harbor master makes his best efforts, but there's no guarantee if they buy a much larger boat. And
then we've had it happen that non-members have been on the town list for Southport Harbor, and with good-sized boats, good-sized deep draft boats. And they have been assigned moorings in the Perry Green area, and that has happened in recent years. I think you know about that. But in any case, and then we have one where a non-member has a non-member, but on the town list has a good-sized boat that is tied. They made room for that person off the list because he was on it. They took up the space where 3 smaller boats could have been and put that boat in there. So they're very flexible about this sort of stuff.
Right, but we don't have to worry about that in terms of what's going on with the plan. I mean, because
those arrangements are made.
That's their
and the harbor master approves of them, and then it's a go.
But some of that, Mary, is addressed through the rules and procedures. Here we're dealing with these 25-year-old recommendations, and we're updating them in places. But we're not.
And you want to be real careful about not making things too rigid. You try to explain why these things change in a way, because I don't think you have to go into write an essay on the subject, but the harbor changes. The harbor itself changes. And the people who want boats change, kind of boats they want.
Right.
We have a lot more big boats in there than we ever had in the past, and I don't know what's going to happen with that situation. Though there has been a fluctuation even of large or versus small boats.
Right.
So it have to be.
So anything else for number 9? Number 9, all moorings. Okay. Moving on to 10, the waiting list.
Mm-hmm.
Want a single mooring wait list for all those on the a single list for all those on the waiting list. Again, I think this is pretty. We've pretty much updated this in our proposed changes to the rules and procedures.
And again, this was important to show that again that there wasn't going to be any but it's for a mooring location. Not in the harbor, but in the mooring locations outside of the Pequot Yacht Club's designated anchorage.
Right. We should be clearer in the title. Right.
And we can bring this up to. We can bring this up to speed.
The yacht club has the yacht club has the right to accept a member and give him a space in their mooring space, if there is one. They do have that. No, they can't get a permit until they can't get the permit if they're coming off the waiting list. But I don't know. I think they can get a permit if they are coming into the. I don't know. I have forgotten about that. Can't remember that one.
Well,
do you remember that one, Jeff? Joe Bloker? I think the people have been on the waiting list. No matter who they are.
No, people on the waiting list go to the town anchorage on our waiting list. Pequot may have its own waiting list, but that has nothing to do with us.
Yes, it has its own waiting list.
But it has nothing to do with us. So this is about the town. This is about the town waiting list, and that we can. Anything we want to add to that that's not in our?
I think we just go through it.
In order to get the members of the Pequot Yacht Club who are sitting now in the commercial mooring field are on the town list, and they can get in if they get an offer for a space, they get it. Right. Yeah. So that happens, but yes, the town for any mooring. But even if they're in the commercial mooring field or not, they have to be on the town list to get a different one.
Right, and we've just changed our rules, and reflect those changes here.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I think
Number 11, transient mooring locations and tackle. This is where. I think we've already made some suggestions.
So there may be an overlap with this and one of the recommendations we talked about before, but But we can something like this still needs to be continued here.
Right.
Well, one of the things that a transient
vessel gets... We should just take a look at the rules, Jeff, and just make sure that what we write here is reinforcing that. Yeah.
Right,
if the yacht club has a transient vessel in the harbor, they are not only obliged to give a mooring if they have one, and they are also obliged to supply transportation from their boat into the land, is my understanding.
Right, and that's what this says.
Yeah, and it does.
Number 12,
Pequot
Yacht Club should continue to provide important services. This is, we talked about this above, didn't we?
Yeah, with respect to what the yacht club would provide, has to provide in order to use the defederalized anchorage, what became the North Anchorage.
Right.
So maybe for simplicity, we think about just combining those recommendations together to incorporate the points here rather than having a 12th item.
Yeah.
I think it's good for people to know that the yacht club is doing that kind of thing.
Yeah. And instead, I think we use a different adjective than important, but that's just language that we could. But these services that the yacht club would provide, right?
Okay. And then 13, dredging should be carried out to improve navigation safety. Yikes.
Well, I think this is where we put in the sand management plan and the plan we come up with the Corps of Engineers to dredge the 100-foot channel.
Okay.
So the idea of, I think some of these historic areas that we talked about, other areas of the harbor that have historically been used for boating activities should be dredged. Some of these, the area of the town boatyard, and we refer to the Treves dock here, of course, later on becomes the lower wharf.
Okay.
But I think we can. This is the maintenance dredging of the harbor, and we incorporate the sand management plan for the dredging of the sandbar.
Jeff, should we make mention of the point that Mark makes that the protection of the wall that is no longer providing for protection? Should we make this higher to prevent sand blowing over? Is that something that we can build into recommendations maybe here? That make a more permanent fix or a semi-permanent fix to what's been an ongoing problem?
I think that has to be part of our sand management plan. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I wonder if here is in terms of recommendation relative to this dredging. I mean, the dredging becomes less of a burden if we don't have as much sand blowing over.
Yeah.
Well, it's not. It doesn't only blow over; it washes right through the wall itself, and it comes off the beach from the country club beach. Is now sitting on a dune. The country club beach house.
Right.
That was much lower in the good old days, and so.
But to Mark's point.
Go ahead.
No, Mary, Jack. One approach is to look at raising the wall, and I think that there's a lot of problems associated with that. It may be more cost effective just to determine a plan to excavate sand from the east side of the wall or the jetty as it builds up, and manage the sand that way, move it away from the jetty from time to time.
Yeah, I think maybe the recommendation is to look at a whole range of possible solutions that are better than just
the environmentally sound recommendations should be saleable. And they certainly are interested in getting decent shellfish beds out there. But you have to be careful on that department as well, because now you're stepping on the toes of people who own that property out there, the under-the-water property.
Jack's point is this is a substantial area of recommendations here having to do with dredging.
Right.
And to try to reduce the frequency of future dredging, which is to manage the sand around the jetty.
Right. What's environmentally helpful.
Yeah.
All of that would be very helpful.
Right. And there would be
approval process is so onerous that anything we can do to reduce the frequency of needing to do it is a huge advantage.
Right.
Well, yes, of course, it's extremely expensive.
Any other suggestions? Okay.
Kim, I don't have a. Can I? Hello. Am I on mute?
Yeah, go.
I can hear you. Yeah.
Oh, I'm not.
No.
Okay, good. So
we hear you, Mark.
So regarding the jetty, and I guess my question might be to maybe to Jeff, but primarily, but anybody else. Would there be some benefit in just using this process to raise the possibility or potential for raising the elevation of the jetty? Through this process, we'll find out whether take people's temperatures to whether there's interest or objection to it. Because I don't have any idea whether it would be popular or not. I think that maybe there'd be people who'd be concerned about the blocking of their view, even if it's only a few inches. It does make a difference in some people's view who live in that area, or people, of course, visiting the shore. On the other hand, I'd say it's kind of an easy case to make for it, since we're experiencing already sea level rise and are expecting more sea level rise, and for the fact that it's underwater even at a seasonal high tide occasion without any wind. Just from the protection of property standpoint, as well as the sand management standpoint. So there's the argument to be made for it, but getting some feedback on the thought, even if we don't even have a project in sight, to me would make some sense. But I'm just asking Jeff, because do you feel as part of this process that would be helpful or not?
I think we should. Well, again, I don't say I think what difference does it make, but I think it's problematic to pursue that. And we talked about it with the Corps of Engineers. I think the main thing is to say we've got to do something to reduce the movement of sand. But since this is the way it was explained to me by the Corps of Engineers, since that's part of the federal channel, or the Federal Navigation Project, authorized by an act of Congress, if we were to propose raising that jetty, we'd first have to get Congress to authorize funds to evaluate the costs and benefits of doing that. And it's not anticipated that since there's no commerce or no, it's a recreational harbor, that there wouldn't be any benefit to the federal government of raising that. And I guess if you could come up with private funds to do it, it just seems that it would be more practical and more achievable if we could come up with a plan to just maintain, the way the jetty is supposed to be maintained. You move the sand away from the east side, and you let it, catch up against the east side, and when it fills up, you move it elsewhere. And then the concern there was that, is the town doing something to improve the beach of a private entity, and how that would go. But you're right. We have to do something about that. And the discussions with the Corps of Engineers now for what they're proposing, they made clear that they're not proposing anything in this regard. They're only proposing a maintenance dredging project. If we've got something else to suggest or we want to pursue on our own, we can do that. But I just think
you run into a lot of trouble if you did.
Getting approval to raise that structure is going to be something that. Well, anyway, I think we should list it.
I think about
this plan could also last us for 25 years.
But I think we could.
Maybe it is a feasible option that should be put on the table in the document. Maybe it gets discarded, but at least it's in writing that that's one of the possibilities.
To evaluate.
Very much the environmental.
Yeah.
The Connecticut environmental thing would absolutely say no, flat out, bang. That's it.
No, we don't
flat
know.
surfaces.
But Mary,
what waves you found on.
We list it as an option or something to evaluate, and if that gets, turns out to be infeasible, maybe it focuses then on something that is feasible to do, which is the, moving the sand.
Yeah.
Okay, I got what I want. Jeff, thanks. I got what I want. I don't want to hold up this discussion on this.
It's a good discussion.
More than you and I can talk about.
Yeah.
Right. Sadly. Yeah. Okay, so Jeff, you're going to include the Corps' plan here and any other suggestions.
They've flatly said it's maintenance dredging. They have not put in any kind of a buy-in time, a plan for by in the future of moving that sand, which is very, very healthy sand, offshore,
right,
and turning it into another shellfishing area.
That's what we're doing, Mary.
Right.
That's what we're working on.
Yeah,
that's what we're going to do.
Yeah, that's what you're working on.
Yeah,
and that is
right.
That makes sense because that has the possibility of producing food, the possibility of slowing down the deterioration of the adjacent land, et cetera, et cetera. And meanwhile, hopefully they'll come up with other and better ideas. But
right.
Yeah. So but you have to look ahead into the. This is can't just build a high wall.
14 being deleted.
14 was the onion dock, and that's there's nothing more to say about that, I don't believe.
Good.
It's gone.
Okay. And then 15, a public landing should be maintained in the harbor.
That's boatyard.
Right.
And I think that we may want to update that with some more, but that stays as it is.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's a condition of the and we have to demonstrate that or attest to that when we proceed with hopefully the federal dredging project in order to attest that everything is in order.
Given that, Jeff, is there a reason? Is that a reason then to maintain or to continue to include the number of boats that access the harbor through your yacht yard? I'm thinking of that the recommendation. What was it? Where we talked about the number of boats who had moorings through the yacht yard and Perry Green and the yacht club.
I don't think we have to do that here because as we move on to the rest of this chapter, there's a section on access to the harbor, and one of the recommendations concerns access through the town boatyard. But here is the landing that people want to come to the harbor at Southport. They should be able to tie up at a public landing, and that's what we identified as this spot here on the north side of the town boatyard.
Yeah, and they can also tie up at a transient landing and mooring in the harbor.
But that's different than that's different than the public landing.
And the public can do that. They don't have to belong to anything.
Right. But here, Mary, we're just referring to what's called a public landing in the authorizing document for the navigation project, that the town will provide a free public landing, and it also says suitable facilities for service and supply of pleasure craft, but that goes back to 1935, and local regulation and control will provide for equitable public use of the landing and other facilities. So we have that's.
It doesn't provide for equitable blah 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 because they don't have anybody tending that dock.
Well, there's also supplies to the extent that is appropriate up at the Pequot Yacht Club.
Yes, you can state what it says in the Connecticut State Book.
But we have to.
Right. No, we can.
I don't know how we can manage the public landing any better than make sure that the regulations are such that somebody can't tie up there for days at a time and block space, but that there's a time limit on use of that, and I think that's all we can do to ensure that the public has a reasonable opportunity to use unlimited space.
Transit moorings are available, and they when a lot of boats are gone. You can get more transients in than a minimal 3.
Right.
And we have a recommendation concerning the transient moorings elsewhere in here.
Yeah. And the services provided at the dock at Pequot Yacht Club. And those are good services.
Right. Okay, folks, so that takes care of this part of Chapter 6. I suggest that we plan to get together towards the end of May. I was looking at the calendar, May 27, which is the Thursday before the Memorial Day weekend. I don't know if that's a good date for people or not. But that would be we could do it at 4, we could do it at 3, whatever is convenient. But that would be my suggestion for our next meeting when we look at the environmental recommendations that are part of this Chapter 6. Any thoughts, suggestions? Okay, so why don't we
Whatever's
tentatively
good for
plan
you.
to meet at? Yep. Does that work for you, Jeff?
Yes.
Okay. Why don't we tentatively plan to meet at 4 on the 27th, and if conflicts arise and too many conflicts arise, we can reschedule at a time that would be more convenient for everybody. So
Can
any
you say
other
4
before we adjourn? 4 o'clock. Yep, 4 o'clock on the
okay.
27th.
Okay.
Any other suggestions before we adjourn?
Kim, I had one that might be worth checking out. I was saving.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty simple. So just a general comment. Some of these paragraphs, so like section 12 has, A, B, C, D. It has headings to them in italics, and I would just recommend more of that stuff. More headings on subparagraphs. So, for example, like in section 10, it's kind of a large section. Subparagraph J talks about the mooring permit fee. You just have a heading saying mooring permit fee. So for not only for us, but anybody who picks this up who doesn't know their way around can just find what they're looking for a little bit quicker. That's all.
Good idea.
You're going to put this online when you get all finished with it?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, okay, because, yes, all right.
Okay, if there are no further suggestions, we'll be adjourned until the 27th of May, and if there are conflicts do arise, please let me know, and we can see about rescheduling. Thank you, everybody. I think this was a good meeting.
Thanks, Kim.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for hosting.
Bye.
Thanks for your time, Jeff.
Bye.
Yep, bye, guys.
Bye.